The Virgin Suicides, both the 1999 film directed by Sofia Coppola and the 1993 novel it's closely based on, written by Jeffrey Eugenides, follows the attempts by a group of men to solve a mystery from their 1970s teenagehoods. Namely, why did four elusive, beautiful, and unknowable sisters who lived in their neighborhood all commit suicide at the same time, on the same night, right in front of them, scarring them for life? There will be pop analysts, literary critics, and film buffs who tell you that there isn't an answer to that question. I beg to differ. Bringing both Coppola's film and Eugenides' novel together, here I intend to bring you as close as we can to a definitive answer. Spoilers abound if you haven't seen the film or read the novel, both of which I consider great, by the way. The Virgin Suicides, and from this point on, unless specified, I am talking about the movie and book, both, doesn't outright state why the Lisbon girls decide to impulsively kill themselves on that 70s night, permanently traumatizing the narrators. But it also doesn't not suggest a reason, and at times tantalizing comes close to a resolution. Eugenides and Coppola are not interested in reasoning and motive, and don't structure the film or book like a mystery. They are interested in women's coming of age, seen from a distance, the toxicity of nostalgia, and the way the nuclear family itself is a mystery we all decide to engage in. We open on a narrator reflecting on his teenage years in the 1975's Detroit, Michigan suburbs. The narrator is not one man, but a chorus of men, all the boys who were obsessed with the dead girls, combining their voices into one. What they all had in common was that they were obsessed with the Lisbon girls, four sisters who lived nearby to them and went to school with them. 13-year-old Cecilia Lisbon attempts to end her life in the opening scenes, unsuccessfully, launching 1 million Tumblr posts, when afterwards she explains her reasoning to her doctor thusly.
What are you doing here, honey? You're not even old enough to know how bad life gets.
Obviously, Doctor. You've never been a 13-year-old girl.
At the doctor's advice, the strict religious Lisbon family throw a party for the girls in their basement and invite the neighborhood boys, our narrators. It is at this party that Cecilia finally succeeds, dying after jumping from the top window onto a fence paling. One death, however, is easy to explain away. The family's priest records the death as an accident, and in retrospect, Cecilia is written off an odd girl for whom suicide was always a foregone conclusion. We never get the direct perspective of the girls or the family about any of this, except in every so brief moments. But I suspect they disagree with this assessment. From the perspective of the narrator, what follows is the remaining sisters become increasingly isolated. Lux, the most rebellious sister, briefly escapes through a doomed romance with Trip Fontaine, the only source of information our narrators reliably speak to about the girls. This relationship leads to the girls finally being withdrawn from school and the world completely. They and their parents cease leaving the home. The girls form a secret connection with a group of neighborhood boys, culminating in a final, tragic night when all the sisters invite the narrator boys over, promising a road trip to escape with them, but instead take their own lives in front of the boys. Years later, the now-grown boys remain haunted by the mystery of the Lisbon Sisters. It's worth noting that Eugenides' novel's biggest difference is that Mary survives this final night unintentionally, but finally succeeds some weeks later. So why did the girls die? More accurately, why did they feel they must kill themselves? In real life, suicide is an impossible thing to answer, its reasoning unknowable. In fiction, however, we can propose some questions. The author and filmmaker must have felt some narrative purpose is served by having all the girls pass away together like this in the final act. And the title suggests this isn't meant to be an unexpected tragedy by a long foregone conclusion. Were the girls escaping a strict religious upbringing which restricted their burgeoning adolescence? Mrs. Lisbon, in particular, is depicted as a church-going conservative woman who reacts poorly to Lux's sexualized behavior, punishing all the girls when she comes home late after prom. Trip Fontaine, her dance date and the only male known to get close to any of the sisters, sleeps with Lux on the football field after prom. He abandons her there and never sees her again. Even he cannot explain his callousness in doing so. When Lux wakes, she returns home in the morning in a taxi to a family suddenly under a strict regime, kicking off the most isolated period of the Lisbon girls' short lives. Mr. Lisbon is depicted as less interested in controlling his daughters. The only male in the house, he's more of a passenger in his wife's and daughter's family dynamic. When Tripp asks to take Lux to the dance, it is Mrs. Lisbon that Mr. Lisbon feels must give permission, which she does under the provision that all the sisters attend with random raffled-off dates, and that Mr. Lisbon attend the dance as a teacher, chaperone. The book depicts him as almost feeling trapped in a household overflowing with feminine energy, and when a local boy is brought over for dinner, he relishes the opportunity to share in traditional masculine interest. You could close the book or leave the cinema with this solution in mind and feel perfect at peace, knowing that these girls were simply trying to escape their household dynamic. But this doesn't feel right. Plenty of parents were strict in 1975, even to the point of social isolation, and the simultaneous death of a sibling group like this is rare. It also doesn't explain why Cecilia felt she must die well before Mrs. Lisbon places these restrictions on the household. Cecilia ends her life precisely as her mother opens the house up to their peers. The novel's author wrote in a Guardian article in 2023 of the precise origins of his book. He states, "I got talking to the teenage girl who was babysitting my 1-year-old nephew. She was a chatty, Midwestern girl, seemingly untroubled by life, but in the span of our brief conversation, which didn't last more than 5 minutes, she told me, out of the blue, that she and her sisters had all attempted suicide. Shocked, I asked why. 'I don't know,' she said. 'We just had a lot of pressure.' That was as much as I learned before my sister-in-law brought in the baby and my family, and I left for dinner. I never spoke to the girl again. I don't subscribe to the view that the author of the novel necessarily is God. But let's unpack this. In his sense, the reason is that the Lisbon girls were under pressure. If pressure doesn't necessarily mean the pressure of a religious, strict upbringing, what could it mean? I mentioned earlier a key theme being a woman's coming of age. The Virgin Suicides depicts this, though, not through a first-person perspective, but from the limited perspective of the neighborhood boys who watch the Lisbon girls live and die. In one moment, the boys are handed Cecilia's diary, post-mortem. They pore over the most mundane details of her life, as if it holds the key to her death. Lux's normal romantic exploration with Tripp Fontaine is the backbone of the story, up until Tripp makes the awful decision to abandon Lux after sleeping with her. Following this, Lux, from the boy's perspective, becomes something of a 14-year-old femme fatale, sitting on her family's roof, sleeping with random adult men, and being sexualized by all that discuss her, even the narrator. Eugenides' self-aware writing and, of course, Sofia Coppola's female gaze show this for what it is. Lux abstracting her own at various points, including the climax of the story, when the boys are invited in the home to watch the sister die. The narrator quickly notes that the Lisbon Sisters, sans Lux, could never live up to the level of female desirability the boys have set for them. The narrator notes that, yes, some of the girls up close have imperfect features or are otherwise just normal young women. It is only for the fact that the narrators are retrospectively obsessed with the girls that they write these imperfections off. Is Tripp's sudden lack of interest in Lux after sleeping with her linked to this realization that the mysterious Lisbons are just normal girls? Early on, a theory in town is that Cecilia was imitating a local boy's harmless jump from his cousin's roof as a way to express his undying, ridiculous love for a girl. But when the narrator boys get their hands on Cecilia's diary, it is shown that she regarded this leap from the roof as silly and mundane. It explains nothing, but without the insight of the diary, it would have been a theory that followed Seclia around post-mortem. Lux gets her nights with Tripp, and Cecilia, being the first to die and having her diary stolen, get the most insight by the novel and movie into their inner worlds. Both are filtered through masculine interpretation. The movie literally shows a local boy trying to decode Cecilia's diary. And Tripp is, of course, a superficial teenager who dumped Lux the moment he got what he wanted. The other sisters, Bonnie, Therese, Mary, don't even get this superficial insight. We know Cecilia was an environmentalist, an observer, a diarist, and that Lux crushed on Tripp and had some need met by exploring sex. We can only assume their sisters also contained the same multitudes, needs, and desires that we don't even come close to being shown. The only similarity, aside from gender, that the sisters eventually share is their deaths. What the Virgin Suicides is saying, I think, that the coming-of-age process, like all things, is gendered. And despite the narrator's interviews with neighbors, record-keeping, diary-stealing, and investigation, there is something at the core of a woman's experience of coming into the world as a young adult that is unknowable. The boy's fascination with the unknowableness of womanhood is captured in the book and movie with a moment where, Invited to the house for dinner, a local boy stumbles upon a cabinet full of sanitary napkins for the girls. This is treated with the same reverence as coming across the Rosetta Stone when he later shares the story with fellow obsessors. It can't be that the narrators aren't intellectually aware of the fact that all women experience menstruation, but the magnifying glass they put overtop the Lisbons makes this biological fact somehow a key to the mystery. So, finally, why did the Lisbon girls have to die? And more specifically, why must they have died in such a tragic, seemingly avoidable way? A recurring motif throughout the virgin suicides is the cutting down of the local elm trees, all of which are infested with a fungus that will kill them. One of the most important moments in the film and book comes here. Saving these trees was particularly important to Cecilia and is a cause the rest of the sisters take up even after her death. The narrators know all the trees are going to die because they're looking back from the future. The sisters' fight to save the trees, they know, is therefore futile. They are infected. They are contagious. They must be cut down. There's research now, 50 years after the setting of the story, that shows that suicide is contagious. Not literally. Not in the sense that it's a virus you can catch, but the sense that we know communities which experience a tragic, self-inflicted death often have similar deaths follow in short succession. Suicide leads to copycats. It transforms in reasoning, but it perhaps leaps from person to person. It's why news reporting about self-inflicted death is careful in how it is described. Any good reporter will tell you they are trained to avoid playing a part in the suicide contagion. Did Cecilia, as the narrator says, spread a sickness in the air to her sisters when she died? We know the Lisbon girls spend the last half of the story cooped up together at home, post their sister's death. They desperately try to reach out to the outside world via calling the neighborhood boys, sharing postcards with them, and communicating secretly. They stop going to school, to church. They are alone together, experiencing the totally unknowable experience, unknowable to our male narrators, of becoming women together. The perfect environment to catch and spread a contagion, while containing that contagion to themselves. The key to the answer isn't the little information we know about Lux or Cecilia that the narrators manage to scrounge together, but the total lack of information that the narrators gather about the other sisters. I know. The sisters had a suicide pact is an uninteresting answer. But it is the only answer, and the fact that we don't totally know why they felt the need to make that pact is part of the story's enduring value. We are never, as strangers, going to break the bond of secrets between sisters, not sisters forced to be this close, nor sisters this fictional. Post Cecilia's death, the girls seem to be aware of the fact that they are treated like objects of fascination, of strangeness. We also know they want to debunk some of the overly mysterious gossipings about them. The night the sisters go together to the dance with the boys, they spend the drive gossiping about strange neighbors like everyone else, sipping secret drinks and smoking cigarettes. Like all women, they know they are always being seen and perceived at all times. If at some point between Act 1 and the final moment they made this pact, they know their deaths will be treated with mysteriousness and reverence by the boys who communicate with and spy on them, who steal their sister's diary and wonder about them non-stop. So, the idea of inviting the boys over, of making sure the boys find their bodies after their pact, seems needlessly provocative and almost seems to play into the mythos around them. But in a group of sisters for whom this kind of death seems the only answer, who are constantly passing this contagion to one another, maybe having the boys present felt like a way to do what they felt was necessary, whilst also trying to invite the speculators into the last moments of their lives. This is what it was, they seem to be saying. This is what we decided to do. As you can see, it was the only option we had. Because the book and movie exists, we know the sisters' attempts at preemptively explaining their choices didn't work. The boys were simply unable to even begin to understand their coming of age, and were still busy decoding Cecilia's mundane diary entries. So, 20 years on, the boys are still obsessing about a choice the sisters made. The reasoning of it all is, of course, the point of the virgin suicides. Try as the sisters might, they were never going to understand.